I want to thank today's sponsors, Grill Your Ass Off Seasonings. They got great merch, seasonings, condiments, everything. Check them out, grillyourassoff.com/mychowline. I want to thank armedforces.press. Check them out. Great news source about what's going on in the military here in the States and abroad. Also, I want to thank Lasered Gifts for You for awesome logo done on my ammo cans here and on the hat. Get these hats done. Thanks so much, Don. Appreciate it so much. So check them all out. grillyourassoff.com/mychowline, armedforces.press, and Lasered Gifts for You on Facebook. All right, guys, welcome to. I'm Tracy Lingle. We're working with Armed Forces Press here. I've got Steve Beynon on here from military.com. He's going to talk a little bit about himself, and then we'll get into what we really want to talk about.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Kind of give us a background of where you come from and what your story is.
Yeah, so born and raised in Ohio. I have about a 15-year background in the National Guard, been in various cavalry and infantry units over my career. I've been in journalism for about 10 years, cut my teeth in local Cincinnati news. I was actually there for Harambe, if anyone remembers that. Came out to DC, worked at Politico for a little while. And when you're the military guy, you kind of get scooped into covering defense issues. So went into Stars and Stripes for a little bit, covered the PACT Act, and now I'm at military.com, where I mostly cover issues pertaining to the Army and quality of life issues for soldiers.
Great. Yeah, because that's one of the big hot topics right now, at least for us, for me anyway, because I'm around the food industry. I'm not really a reporter, but I love food, and I love making sure I feed everybody. And my goal is to help teach outdoor cooking and barbecue to veterans, my YouTube channel goes along with that.
Yeah.
But
are you recording outside, or is that just like your background?
Yeah, I'm outside. That's
outside.
Fantastic.
You got to be the only podcast that records outside, which I think is fantastic. I would love to be outside of the sunlight. That's a phenomenal setup to have.
Yeah, well, it's my YouTube channel. This is my area where I record, and so I figured this would be. I try to do this. There was a couple of times I did it where the weather wasn't appropriate, so I went inside and had to put a background up. But I love it. It feels good.
No, that's the way to do it, especially now. I'm in a creepy, dark basement. So,
well, thank you. Yeah. So the quality of life issues are especially when it comes to food for our soldiers and stuff. And one of the things your article that you wrote at military.com about the 151 million that the Army has pretty much stolen from the soldiers, or allegedly stolen from them. Where did you get that? Where'd you come across all that information?
Yeah, so this initially started with some coverage of an issue at Fort Carson. They've run into a lot of logistical issues, kind of keeping food stock, stuff like that. Soldier reporting issues, showing up to the dining facility, and the food's not being there. The food's not to a decent quality. This is kind of a pretty simple story, like Fort Carson, they're having some logistical issues. Whatever, we would call that like a daily story in this business. I mean, kind of like in and out, right? Not a big grand story per se. And then I decided to ask them, hey, what is the actual money brought in and money spent on food? So here, let me bring that up so I can actually source my numbers correctly. This story came out in November, and bringing it up now. And they, so when I say they collected, the installation itself does not, like literally they are not the ones collecting the BAS money from troops, but I just lost them. I'm boomerang my setup right now.
That's all right.
So this is great radio right now. Anyway, so soldiers at Fort Carson contributed $22 million to the pot of BAS money. BAS is effectively a tax on junior troops. This is money meant to subsidize food. If you live in the barracks, most of that is taken away. It's about $460 a month, and that is specifically by law meant to fund the food at the dining facility for said soldier to go to. Fort Carson soldiers contributed $22 million, and the budget for Carson was only $5 million. And that's when alarm bells went ringing. I'm like, okay, so 22 million was collected, 5 million was spent. This is in 2024. That is an enormous gap of money. So where did the rest of it go? So I wanted to immediately know, is Fort Carson an outlier in this? So I requested data from the Army for its 11 largest installations, and I define that as places with division headquarters. The Army has over 100 garrisons, but the major ones, I'm talking Fort Campbell, Bragg, Cavazos, Bliss, the heavy hitters. And the gap was there was consistency in that there was a gap, but how big that gap is what varied wildly. But on average, places effectively left about 40% or so money on the table, but the gaps are pretty large. They get pretty wild pretty quickly. So Fort Stewart, for example, soldiers there contribute $17 million to the BAS pot of, we'll just call it the BAS pot of money. That same year, Fort Stewart spent $2 million on food. So in effect, we are seeing the Army collecting an enormous amount of money from soldiers that is meant for one purpose and not spending it on that purpose. And it can't account for where that money's at.
Right. So when you were researching all this stuff, you asked for that information from the Army, correct?
Yes. This was not I wish I had a really sexy Pulitzer Prize winning Watergate story of me getting all these secret documents and meeting people in parking garages, but this was a very, very simple inquiry to the Army up at the Pentagon. Said, hey, what are you all these bases, what are you collecting, what are you spending? That's all. It was very simple. And mind you, so when we talk about the total gap of $151 million, right? The Army collected $250 million from these 11 installations, $151 million unaccounted for. And this is just 11 installations. The Army has over 100 garrisons. So the reality of what the total amount is likely much bigger. And when they gave me the data, obviously I said, okay, so this is a story at this point. It is not, Fort Carson is not an outlier. And so I wanted the rest. I wanted every installation. That's when they told me no. They said, we are not giving you anything else. You got to do a Freedom of Information Act request, which this actually violates. We're going to get a little nerdy and wonky here, but the Army has a field manual on its own public affairs transparency rules. And in effect, it says you can't make a report or FOIA for things. There's some caveats to it, things that deal with personal information. It gets a little weird when you talk about classified stuff, but the simple practice of taxpayer money spent, right, is not classified. It's not sensitive information. And they gave me the biggest part of the data. So this was them wanting to kill the story. They were unsuccessful. And for the folks listening, a Freedom of Information Act request is a legal tool reporters use to get information from the government. But that is not an immediate thing. Those take years to go through. They just get in this big stack. The government bureaucracy is not good at going through, and they don't want to go through them. They have to get it to a certain point. There's no law that says when they have to give said information. So I'll get Freedom of Information Act requests that I sent 4 years ago, and I forgot what I even asked. I'll just get a big stack of papers in the mail. I'm like, what the fuck is this? I forgot I even sent it.
Yeah. So as we've been talking about it, Angry Cops got on and he got a hold of your story and shared it and got it out there for everybody. And that's kind of when I started hearing about it. I had seen blippets of it, but I didn't really know what was really going on. And I started looking into what you wrote, and then I started doing some other stuff and started talking to some people in around, and it became clear that nobody knows where that money goes,
right?
And nobody's accounting for it, and it goes back even before COVID. What was it, 2020, that the Secretary of the Army was asking for more budget stuff, and one of the guys on the board said, "Hey, what about all this money that's not getting spent? What's going on
Right.
with it?"
Yeah.
I'll get back
This
to
is
you.
not a Trump administration issue. This is also not a new issue. This is new in the sense that we're aware of it now. We have the receipts, but it's seemingly been going on for years. Because when I started looking into it, in my research, there was a House hearing 4 or 5 years ago. Secretary McCarthy was asked about it by Congressman Tim Ryan. I'll get to that in a second, but he pulled up similar numbers to what I have and said, "Where's this money?" Secretary McCarthy didn't really have an answer. The hearing, that was just one question in a larger hearing. It's very common for service secretaries to just get pounded with a bunch of questions that aren't related, and if they're hearing about an issue for the first time, which seemed to be the case, they're just not going to have an answer ready. I actually talked to Secretary McCarthy on the phone. He doesn't remember getting asked the question or remember doing any follow-up, which I think maybe we can give him a pass for it, because this is right when COVID was starting. Right. This is right when we started getting cases, but people weren't wearing masks or anything like that. And those were the before times. I think anything that was going on right when COVID was hitting, it's not an answer that we like, but
Yeah.
Nothing got followed up with. This is just a thing that fell through the cracks with Ryan McCarthy, and it didn't come up during Warmoth's tenure. I talked to some of her staff, and this is just not an issue they were necessarily tracking. So this is really kind of the first time we've really been able to tackle the issue to the ground and get our teeth in it.
Now, would you say that you this is all speculation, of course, but would it be possible that it's more along the lines of some of the line officers that deal with this situation in the finance that are not making it an issue? They found ways to do it because they're probably not their career. They're not elected, so they're not coming in and changing with every administration like you do with secretaries and the sec defs and all that kind of stuff. So is it possible that this has just become a standard operating procedure to move this money around for whatever they want to use it for? Or
right.
Is that possible?
Yeah. So I think this is so we always hear the Pentagon never passes an audit. The Pentagon bureaucracy and how it spends money is extremely complicated. They have a lot of pockets of money, a lot of acronyms. It gets wonky and complicated really, really quickly. And I think this is a very small anecdote to that bigger piece of the pie. I don't think any of this is malicious. I don't think anyone is purposefully robbing soldiers to go cut checks to Raytheon on the side or anything like that. I think this is I suspect, I don't have the receipts for this, but if we're speculating and based on my conversations with people, I think this is an accounting issue that no one was really tracking. People who work on food issues in the Army, it's spread across the G1, the G4, the G8, all these different staffs. The pie is so spread out. There's not a lot of ownership of the issue. And when I showed these numbers to them, they weren't trying to spin me. I really think like no one really put these numbers side by side. And what I mean by that is the total money collected versus the money spent. It's very simple. But talking to these staffs that deal with this money, they're so deep in the rabbit hole on funding things, where money goes, how money's spent, but they've never really taken that step back and looked at it on a very simple grounds. And I think people listening and watching, that sounds pretty wild because it is so simple. But I just don't think anyone's ever looked at this before.
Yeah, that sounds about logical too, because each base has its own issues. That's why you would have a discrepancy in the amount of money spent at each one, because some of them do a better job of spending the money and others don't. And a lot of it comes down to the leadership on those bases, I would think.
Right, which I never got a good answer. I never got a good answer on, let's say, let's just pick a random installation, Fort Bliss. Okay. Soldiers contributed $22 million to BAS. They spent $11 million on food. So about half, and they're actually one of the better ones. I never got a good answer on why, when you're figuring out your food budget, I mean, I understand there might be scenarios where it doesn't evenly match for a lot of complicated reasons. But why would the gap ever be 50%? Why, when you start your budget, effectively where the money is collected? It never made a lot of sense to me, and I don't think it makes a lot of sense to the Pentagon staff of what's going on here. The argument on their side is, well, it's based on headcount, and fewer soldiers are using the DFAC, so they're not putting as much money into, which makes sense if you don't ask any follow-up questions, right? Because the follow-up questions is, well, have you tried spending the max amount of money on it and making it really nice and like offering really nice food? Like, let me write the story that you all are throwing out tomahawk steaks, right? You spent too much money on food, the soldiers don't care. And I'm like, wow, the Army wasted all this money on tomahawk steaks and wine, right?
Right.
Let's see where that goes. And then my follow-up question is, okay, so you're not spending the money you're taxing from soldiers. I get it. Have you corresponded with Congress to shift the NDAA, which sets how the Pentagon spends money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of how much money you're collecting from the soldiers? And there's crickets when you ask that question, right? If it makes sense, if you're only spending a third of the money you're collecting from soldiers, can you let him keep that 2/3? Have you talked to Congress about turning off that spigot because you don't need all the money? And that's something that I didn't get a lot of answers from either.
Yeah, because that would make more sense that as a overall, is having it adjusted for each base. That way they can, soldiers at this base don't spend that much money on the food. So let's just give the soldiers back their money. That way they can go utilize it for other things like going to the PX or going to the, ordering Grubhub. Right. That's what a lot of them are doing.
Yeah. And it's good to keep in mind that, I mean, these are junior enlisted soldiers. They're making $30,000 a year. I mean, these are effectively poverty wages. And I understand you want to go to the DFAC every single day. Some, want to show in the B's, that's okay. Get some, but groceries are expensive, even for just a single soldier, and especially because they don't really have great access to cooking. So there's not a lot of opportunities to maybe I'll meal prep with a crock pot or something. They're getting a lot of food you got to eat that day. Right. And that gets really expensive really quickly. I mean,
they don't have access necessarily to a kitchen and with a full size fridge and freezer and all that kind of stuff, so they can keep stuff on standby. If they have a fridge, it might be a community fridge in a main area. And
so, I mean, this is more of a commentation on inflation, but in my guard time, you go to maybe some the schoolhouse or something, and maybe you hit the grocery store up or PX and set yourself up for a week or two. And I remember I was like, dude, I just spent like $150, and I got like some crackers and some meat and some stuff to make some sandwiches with. I mean, that stuff just adds up so fast. And I make decent money, but some PFC, that's a real bill for them.
Yeah. And they don't offer a lot of opportunities for them to have grills outside and grilling areas and outdoor socializing areas where they can do that kind of stuff in a safe manner, because we all know privates as well. They'll burn the place down if you don't give them an opportunity to do it safely.
Right.
But okay, so I know that the Army had sent out a MILPER and an ALARACT recently in response to your article. So what is? Can you kind of guide us through exactly what it said and what that means to what their response was to your article?
Yeah, I mean, maybe you could guide me through what it says and means, because I've read it 4 times. I don't really know what they're talking about. I actually autographed one. It was an honor for so for people listening, I mean, MILPERs and ALARACs are effectively mechanisms to issue memos for the entire force to read. It's basic. It's anything the service wants people to know about. They put out an example of another unrelated one that came out is the announcement of the new mountaineering badge. So stuff like that, just announcements they want the whole service to know. I would love for someone to correct me if I'm wrong. A MILPER has never been used to be a shitpost. It's never been used to circumvent the press or basically it's never been used like that. They've always been very formal tools. But what the MILPER says, it called my reporting misleading or something to that effect, but it never said what was misleading. It never actually got into what the problem was. It just said this article is misleading and just kind of left it at that, and didn't really get into the meat, the the meat of the issue. And it's really worth noting that I got much of this data in December. I was ready to kind of pull the trigger on the story in December. And let me bring the story up. When did I want to get the date I published it. The story published February 4th, Valentine's Day. Okay, that's easy to remember. So effectively a week or two before Christmas, we were ready to publish. And I talked to the Army. The Army set me up with some interviews with their staff. And that staff told me my understanding of the issue was correct. Is like, we collect this money, we have no idea where it's at. And it's effectively reallocated to the big Army checking account, which people that understand funding in the Pentagon, when I say big Army checking account, they're cringing. They will pull their eyes out because I'm way oversimplifying DoD money. Because if I actually explained it, we'd be here for 9 hours. But effectively, it just goes into the pool in effect. And I go, okay, so that's really the explanation. And they go, yes. And I go, that's crazy. I'm going to not publish. I'm going to let you guys regroup because this is a bad story and it's going to piss Congress off. It's going to piss the soldiers off. And we got New Year's, we got Christmas coming up, we got New Year's coming up, we got a change of administration. Let's circle back in February. So this is 2 months, which for a reporter is insane to do. Reporters want information right now. Like anything beyond 24 hours for a reporter is an unacceptable amount of time. My editor got a little mad at me actually about it, but I said, no, I want this story to be so airtight. And the explanation the Army gave me made no sense. And so the Army, you know, they were like, okay, cool. So we regrouped early February. They gave me some new staff and who basically repeated the same thing and said, yeah, this is kind of how it is. And I go, okay. And, you know, no staff that would, no officials on the record to put a name to. It's very common when you write stories that deal with policy, they give you like these people that actually work on the mechanics of policy and they're not like media trained. So we do these conversations called on background. I can quote you, I can use the information you give me, but you're not attributed to by name because they're not media trained. They, you know, they just word things weird or, you know, whatever. It's just to protect them. They're not generals. They're not there to be held accountable. It's just like some like 40-year-old civilian, just like, just people that work, you know?
Yeah. Normal people who aren't adjusted for PR and
just normal people. That's a very common practice. Yeah. So, and I was like, okay, well, can I have a general or something? Or the SMA? They're like, absolutely not, because one Army official said something to the effect of like, I don't want any. They mentioned a few officers' names in the SMA and stuff like that. People that I was requesting, they were like, I don't want them within 100 feet of this story. Which I'm like, that's fair. At least they were candid.
Yeah.
So we agreed. I told the Army I basically walked them through what was being published. I said, here's the data you gave me. You gave it to me. That's correct, right? They're like, yep. Okay, this is what your staff told me. Are we good? And they're like, yep. And they're like, this is the entire vibe of the story. There's $151 million that's unaccounted for. And it's being repurposed. We don't know how it's working. And there we go. Okay.
Just for 12 sites, not 100 and something sites, just the 12.
Yeah. This is for only for 10% of your installations. So the real number is likely much higher. They're like, yeah, all right. And I go, okay. And mind you, like, I don't need approval from the Army. I don't care. But you know, we try to, even with bad stories, well, especially with quote unquote bad stories, you don't want to surprise any stakeholders for this very reason. So if they come back, you can counter, be like, we walked through everything. You never brought at the time. Story publishes, Valentine's Day. The Noper came out 2 weeks ago. Second week of March. So a month later. So they waited an entire month for a retort. And that retort didn't actually have any, it's what we call a denial non-denial. It's just when someone just says, we don't like this story, but we're not going to tell you why.
Yeah. The money doesn't go into a slush fund. It doesn't go into a slush fund. It's not.
Yeah,
how it
sure.
works.
Which that's not what we said either. We're just saying that this is unaccounted for, which is true. But this came after nearly 2 dozen members of Congress wrote a letter to Hegseth saying like, "Hey, we read Steve's story. What the hell?" So this was a reaction to Congress, and Congress is still asking the Army questions. They're still getting questions from different offices and stuff like that that I hear about. And congressional staff are calling me. They're like, "We talked to the Army, and what they told us makes no sense." And I'm like, "What'd they tell you?" And they kind of explain it. I'm like, "That's exactly what they told me. I agree. It doesn't make sense."
Yeah. At least show us some receipts for, like, hookers and blow or something, saying we spend it on the strip club outside the base. I don't know, something.
Sure. At least we know,
Yeah,
really,
just
okay.
know where I went.
Yeah. So the Army does not have a real response. I mean, the current administration has a very aggressive attitude towards the media. Fake news this, fake news that. It's grievances when it comes to accountability. But they didn't have anything specific, so we didn't take it very seriously.
Yeah. All right. So now what's the next steps along this line of continuing to push this agenda and push this story to try and get more information, or at least get some accountability?
Yeah, I mean, the next steps, it's in the ball's in Congress's court. I'm sure they are working some things for the next NDA, the National Defense Authorization Act, which funds the Pentagon and effectively sets the policy priorities for it. I don't know what that stuff's going to look like, but there is a lot of attention from the Senate and the House on this. So hopefully they get some more oversight on the issue. But I also think there's an enormous risk of that not happening in a comprehensive way, just because of everything that's going on right now at the Pentagon. This is a big story. It impacts the troops a lot, but there's a lot of I hope it doesn't get swept under the rug.
Right. Well, that's also one of the reasons why I've picked it up, and I've been trying to share it and trying to keep talking about it and try to interview some people to kind of get this information out there, because the more people that know about it, they can call their congressmen or senators and they can say, "Hey, what's going on with this? Why are y'all not talking to them? What's, continuing to push that agenda to make sure it stays in the ear and stays on the front page and then get pushed to the back page."
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, there's a lot of crazy things going on right now with everything. I mean, I'm hearing from people that work inside the Pentagon that it's a hostile work environment in some places there, because the new administration is trying to clean house and try to get rid of people that might be, not favorable to the mission that is now set forth by the president. So, there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. The quality of life issues are definitely some of the most important, because that's the backbone of our fighting force. And if they're not taking care of our soldiers in barracks, then how can we get more guys to want to show up?
Yeah, and we just got a new Army Secretary, Dan Driscoll. We haven't really heard from him too much yet, or what his priorities are going to be. But there is some fresh blood in there with the story out. So hopefully his staff are taking a look at it and working with Congress to see if they can remedy it, to update and modernize how we feed soldiers. I mean, this is the same organization that claims they can get the 82nd Airborne to seize any airfield in the world within 18 hours, and they can't figure out how to get Joe a sandwich. So this just needs some energy into it.
Okay, so I'm not familiar with how the Pentagon works. I'm not a reporter or a journalist of any kind, but I am starting to kind of get into that space a little bit, just on this issue primarily. So I know that the White House has the press secretary and they have all that kind of stuff. I know the Pentagon has the same setup, but I haven't seen a lot of anything being reported out of there. I mean, is that something that you're noticing as well, that the Pentagon is not having press conferences?
Right. Yes. The Pentagon hasn't. They've definitely kept the press at an arm's distance. They really haven't had any formalized press conferences. The press is not being brought on trips with the Secretary of Defense as they have on past at any notable scale. And this is a Pentagon that claims to want to be the most transparent Pentagon ever, but they just they haven't. And it goes beyond not having press conferences. They're not answering emails from reporters. They're not really telling us what they're doing, when, where, and why. We're just not getting any updates on anything of consequence. There hasn't been much communication with the press and therefore the public. And it's worth remembering the Pentagon's the largest part of the federal government, and it demands to have constant accountability.
Right. So who would then controls that? That I mean, of course, that would be Pete Hegseth is ultimately in charge of the Pentagon,
Mhm.
but then his boss, of course, is POTUS. So
Mhm.
is it something that we have to push beyond up to POTUS to make sure that they're putting out information, or what's?
Yeah, and remember, like this is an administration, like I said earlier, is extremely hostile to the press. They are more than happy to talk to media organizations that are partisan and aren't going to press them. I'm thinking, when I say that, I'm thinking about Fox News, I'm thinking about Breitbart, which there's a place for those organizations too. But the straight news outlets that are going to ask questions that might be a little difficult or have more of a mainstream audience, they are trying to keep those outlets as far away as possible. And the media landscape is also changing. There's kind of two things happening at once. I mean, trust in the media is down. So we're kind of in between a rock and a hard place where the government is not cooperative, but also the public doesn't really seem to trust news organizations. So two things need to happen at once. The federal government needs to be more transparent, and news organizations need to work very hard on modernizing themselves and rebuilding that trust with the public.
Yeah, being partisan on a lot of the questions being asked. Doesn't matter whether it's a Republican or Democrat. Some of the questions just need to be asked.
Yeah, and it's also like people's media literacy and media diet. I think there's some of that there. I think people work all day, right? You don't want to go to the construction site for 10 hours and then come back, and you're not gonna. I understand you're not gonna read the 3,000 word investigation from ProPublica or bust open the Wall Street Journal. Like, it is just easier to, I don't know, listen to a Joe Rogan or watch some partisan media outlets. It's just kind of like an easier digestion. I think of it almost like junk food. There's nothing wrong with eating a bag of Cheetos. It just can't be the only thing you're eating. You got to get let's go back to tomahawk steaks. You got to have a tomahawk steak.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I've noticed that since I started kind of getting into this, I've been trying to absorb as much as I can. The problem is I have to work. So I do a lot of skimming. I do a lot of trying to catch the highlights, and I miss stuff all the time. I made a post the other day, and I misunderstood what it was saying. I thought it was interpreting it one way, and it was slightly off. And then I got bashed for it. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I was just, this is what my interpretation of it was.
Right. Yeah.
That's what this was. I skimmed. He's like, well, you didn't read the whole article. Well, it was freaking 15 pages. No, I didn't read the whole article. I skimmed through it and started looking for the highlights and for the things. Don't bury it down in the bottom. Put it up top. You want the truth out there. That's if you want people to read the truth, put it up front. You can back it up, but put what's really, then that's the problem I think most people have with the media is they're putting slanderous or misinformation in the beginning to try to catch the eye. And then the article doesn't have anything to do with what they're putting up there, or it's completely opposite of what it's saying. And I think that's my biggest problem I've had with some articles that I've read from different sites, and so that's why I typically try to I scroll through and look at a couple of different ones to find out what's common and what's not.
Yeah, and this is we're getting into this problem with the military coverage space. Military.com is the largest and most read outlet when it comes to sort of like coverage, but and there's like Military Times. They just had a huge staff clean out from their corporate overlords. They had a lot of layoffs, a lot of change in directions. Task and Purpose, it's a great news organization, but also doesn't necessarily have a lot of staff at the moment. So there's not a lot of coverage right now for the soldier. We're doing it. I think we're doing a really good job, but there's just not a lot of people doing it. So we're having this other issue where like the space for information just isn't as large as it needs to be. This BAS story is a great example. I put it out there, it did a lot of good reporting. I think it's going to lead to some good things. But you know, if there was another well-equipped news outlet that had a lot of resources to cover the Army and issues related to this, maybe they could pick up that ball and take it forward. Like I don't really know where else to take it beyond seeing what Congress does, but maybe some other hotshot reporter would have a great idea. And that's how the news kind of works in the mainstream space, particularly politics. You know, the Wall Street Journal would get a nice scoop. The New York Times kind of takes the ball another yard, and the Wall Street Journal will take the ball another yard. They kind of feed off each other, but that doesn't really exist when it comes to news on military personnel policy. It's us and a couple very underfunded news outlets.
Yeah, and one of the things I've noticed too within a lot of the stuff that articles I've read on anything to do with food in the military, it's all being written, or all these programs are all being run by, you know, colonels, majors, or higher.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
there's nothing from the perspective of the soldier, the E4 below. There's nothing there's nobody, you know, because like all these food programs, when they're talking about doing the campus stuff, there was nothing where they were talking to soldiers on the ground. Actually, what do you need?
Mm-hmm.
It was
Right.
an officer coming in and coming up with this idea and pushing it through, and then never follows up on it. And because I went looking for, when they started talking about doing the campus program, the campus rollout, they were going to do this initial push for an experiment for it, and then it was going to then it got put into practice. They were going to start rolling it out, and that was what, 2017, 2019, something like that. But there's been no follow-up to see if it's actually working. There's been no, that officer was not coming back. He wrote his thing, and he got promoted and moved on.
Right. Yeah.
And,
yeah.
And so I think that's a lot of these perspectives need to come from also the soldier. If you want the soldiers to be able to read the news, there's perspective needs to be from the soldiers, not from the officers that are.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And you get that, that's kind of our biggest problem with senior leadership now. I mean, officers didn't really have to live in the barracks and deal with BAS. And then you got the currently serving Sergeant Major of the Army, Weimer, who grew up in special operations and Delta Force. I'm sure he's a great door kicker, but he's also never lived in the barracks or really served and worked in the conventional Army. So, you know, maybe the issue would be moved forward a little bit, but we don't really have those perspectives in the Pentagon right now where these decisions are made.
Yeah, the only person I know of who was E4 Mafia is JD Vance, so that would have that perspective. And I don't know that if he lived on base and did barrack stuff either. So, but he was a corporal. So
yeah, we do have Corporal Vance. So I don't know. Maybe you know, maybe he'll be in a room at some point and get some sympathy on these issues. But the issue's got to get to him is sort of the other thing.
Yeah.
Does the vice president know that the Army has no idea where its BAS money is? I doubt it. I mean, maybe he's read it or maybe he's heard of it, but that goes into sort of amplifying the issue. The trick with all these issues is you just got to make sure the right person sees it.
Yeah. And tagging him on X doesn't necessarily do it.
No, he probably gets tagged a million times every 10 seconds.
Oh yeah.
Not saying you shouldn't do it, but you know.
Yeah. No, but it's not going to get the message across.
No.
It'll get it in front of some people, but not necessarily the right people.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time, and we look forward to seeing any more articles you put out about this. If you come across anything, and also about the quality of life issues, I'm going to try and stay on top of this and get more information and try to post some more stuff about it, and see if I can't drill down in some areas and maybe interview some people to go more into detail why the DFACs are failing, what the problem is there, because that's the other side of this too. Is you know, why is it that they're not spending the money on the food? How about we figure out why they can't spend more on it,
right?
And reduce the amount that they're letting float away. So that's where I want to try to go from here. So I appreciate you coming on. Thanks so much, and I'll check out at military.com and all your other stuff. And what's your handle on X?
At Stephen Beynon. If you just Google my name, you'll see all my stuff. If you go on military.com any particular day, you'll probably see my stuff and the stuff from all my colleagues. We just in the way that I covered the Army, we have someone for each of the services in the Pentagon and Congress. Our goal was to cover those issues that impact the junior troop.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and thanks for joining us here at armedforces.press, and we look forward to talking to you again sometime soon.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.